Welcome to the Holy Land and this biblical site of the Temple Mount. It's a very beautiful morning here this morning, and we're just very, very privileged to be here on this Temple Mount. So many things happened here. It's just to think about them from Scripture and to meditate and pause and just really understand what happened here is absolutely very, very moving, very, very emotional time to be here this morning, just as a reflectionary time of thinking about what happened here and who was here on this Temple Mount. God decided to create mankind, and He decided to pronounce His message to them. God had a master plan of what He wanted to do through mankind, and so He wanted to communicate. He creates, God creates, and He begins to communicate right off the bat. He communicates with mankind, and so He chooses a people. He chooses Abraham, and He calls Abraham out of Mesopotamia, says, I will make of you a great people, and I will give you a land. So the Abrahamic Covenant encompasses a people, and it encompasses a land. And through this people and this land, God wanted to speak to all of mankind. So in essence, the Jews and this land were God's mouthpiece, a vehicle through which He would not only communicate to them, but He would communicate to all of mankind through them. They were to be a light. They were to be a messenger to the world, to show God His glory. And God wanted all people to come to Him. The Jewish faith just wasn't for the Jews. God had special laws for any foreigner who could come in. So the Jewish faith was an accepting faith. Anyone could come into it. That was God's desire. We see God, we see the prophets even prophesying to the surrounding nations. So anyway, God calls Abraham, and God comes to the Holy Land. And then God tests Abraham, and He says, go to Mount Moriah, to the place that I will show you, and I want you to offer your son, your only son, there. And Abraham is very obedient, so he leaves Beersheba, 3-day journey to right here. This is Mount Moriah. This is the very Mount Moriah right here in the Bible that's talked about. So Abraham comes here with his son, walks up this Mount Moriah here, and comes up to a high place right here to offer his son. God says, no, now I know that you fear me, now that I know that you love me. So then we advance the story, and God continues to work through His people. The nation go to Israel, they come back, they come into the land, they conquer it, they have the moving tabernacle, they set it up in Shiloh, it moves around a little bit, and then David comes onto the scene, and he conquers Jerusalem, and he moves his kingdom from Hebron, where he had reigned for 7 years over the southern tribes. He moves it to Jerusalem, and now he's king over all of the tribes. So he buys a threshing floor right here, and he buys it for a purpose to build an altar. But then he has the desire to build another a temple to the Lord. He says, why should it be that we are in the land securely and the Lord is still in a movable tent, so to speak, although it was somewhat permanent in Shiloh? David builds an altar here, and then once again he has this desire to build a temple. So he wants to do it. God says, no, you have fought too much. You're a soldier. You're a man of blood, shed too much blood, but your son will do that. So David began to make all of the provisions for Solomon to build the temple. So then Solomon builds a temple right on the very spot that Abraham was going to offer Isaac, where David bought the threshing floor, built an altar. So then Solomon builds a temple here. And it's really fascinating as I pause and contemplate, here Abraham comes to offer his only son right here. God would offer His only son right here. Here Abraham would come to offer his sacrifice. Here on the Temple Mount, thousands, if not millions, of offerings would be offered. So this is a place where people would come to get right with God, to reconcile themselves with God through faith, but through faith in the sacrificial system that God had instituted at that time. So mankind has always been made right through faith, through grace, through faith, but at that time their obedience and the faith was exercised through the sacrificial system. Now our faith is exercised in receiving and following Christ, who is now our sacrifice. So anyway, Solomon builds this temple, And I can just imagine when he dedicated it, we're right in the area where the glory just filled this area, just amazingly filled it. That they had to stop, the priests had to stop because it was just too much. So it was just, the glory was amazing. Then Solomon continues and he prays and dedicates the temple. And then we advance the story, and unfortunately the nation of Israel continues to slide in their walk with the Lord. All throughout the judges prior to David, there was these cycles as well. Unfortunately, the history of the Jewish faith, as the Jewish people, is a sad history, because they will do good for a while, then fall away, do good for a while, fall away. So after the glory days of Israel, after David and Solomon, the people fall away, they fall away. God sends them prophets, There's good kings, there's bad kings. And we have these cycles, and God warns them. Unfortunately, they don't take heed. So in 722, the northern tribes are taken into captivity by the Assyrians, and then in 587 BC, the Babylonians come and not only take the two southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, into captivity, but they also destroy everything. So now the temple is destroyed that was once so glorious, that was dedicated, that Solomon had dedicated to the Lord, that David had worked so hard to make preparations for. So a sad day in the life of the history of Israel. Fortunately, God's a faithful God. He's a covenant-keeping God. So 70 years later, after the people go into captivity, God brings them back, puts into the hearts of Cyrus and these different kings to come back and to build another temple. So Ezra leads that. And so right here in this very spot, they build another temple, the temple under Ezra. When it's dedicated, half the people are crying for joy, half of them are crying for sorrow, because the ones who could remember the original temple were sad because the new one wasn't as glorious. But anyway, God says, if you will obey me, I will make you a glorious nation, and I will even make this temple more glorious than the one prior to you. So the people do well for a while, and then the temple that was here under Ezra was the temple that was here just prior to Christ. So then Herod the Great comes on the scene, and he makes the temple platform huge, and his God and his sovereignty is preparing everything for Christ's visitation. King Herod the Great does not know that God is working sovereignly behind the scenes, and he's just a tool. So he makes the temple platform huge, because God knew that it would be a place where the early church would be born and would grow. So anyway, then Herod builds this new temple kind of over the old original temple that Ezra had built, and then dismantles the one inside, because he always had to have a temple. So then we have this huge, glorious temple that King Herod built then during the time of Christ. So that's the place then here that Christ would have ministered at this new temple. Certainly Christ does many things here. He ministers here many times. He's circumcised here. He is comes here as a 12-year-old boy. And then he comes on a regular occasion all the time here to the original temple. Of course, then he ministers here in his ministry time here, teaches here on a very frequent basis. He drives out the money changers here. Then as he's coming down the triumphal entry, he prophesies over the city of Jerusalem and the temple. He says, not one stone will be left upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation. Of course, then in 70 AD, the Romans come and level everything, and the Jews, most of them going to scattered throughout the whole world, not to come back again until 1948, and then of course at that time then the temple is leveled. In 70 AD it's leveled. We wanted to show you the actual rubble from the part of the wall that was knocked down by the Romans. You can still see the floor, the walkway, the roadway is damaged there, and these stones are the same ones that were knocked down by the Romans and never put up again. So you can see the remains of Christ's prophecy right here. And so there's no temple here, and the Jews have no country basically. And so then in 636 AD, then the Muslims come and conquer the area. Then they build the Dome of the Rock, and then of course the story goes on. So anyway, it's very fascinating to really think about what has happened here. But there's also some things that are going to happen here. There is going to be a new temple built here or close by, because during the Great Tribulation, the Antichrist will commit the abomination of desolation in a functioning temple. It says in the Thessalonians that he will go into the temple, desecrate it, commit the abomination of desolation, also mentioned in Matthew 24. So Christ will reign here for 1,000 years, and we as believers will reign with him as well right here. So this Temple Mount has been and will be the center of focus for God's plan on this earth. and it's absolutely amazing to be here. But I also have to think and pause for a moment that as the Old Testament temple was where the Holy of Holies dwelt and where the center of God's presence was, now in the New Covenant, the temple is in our hearts. If you're a believer, God's temple is now in your heart. The Holy of Holies now resides in your heart. So it's a very fascinating concept to really think and behold. So hopefully in this reflective video, as we kind of talk about some of the things that have happened here, hopefully you can better understand God's plan for mankind, how He has used this place to speak through mankind, how He wants to use us in the same way as He used the Jews to be a light to the world. He wants to use us to be a light to the world. So God has a master plan. He is moving right through the course of history, right on schedule, and His consummation is right on schedule, and He has many great plans left that will happen right here. So thank you for watching this video, and God bless you.